Welcome back to the Done Deal Show with Ben Jacobs. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well. I've got to be honest. When I saw the graphic for this particular show and saw not one but two Leicester players in Wes Fofana and Youri Tielemans, I was both delighted and panicked because I'm like, yep, that's my football club, born and bred. But by the same token, if they're there, then it means that there's a risk that they might be gone by the end of the summer. So delighted and panicked when I saw that, but good to be here.
Absolutely. Good to have you back on again, Ben. It's been always enjoy our conversations. And viewers, lots to speak about today. Of course, Fofana to Chelsea. Is it on? Is it off? Will it happen? We're going to go through. We're talking about the Kimpembe situation. Reports coming out of France that he has rejected Chelsea. We'll touch on Jules Kounde and what else Chelsea Football Club are going to do now with some of their main targets falling through their fingers. We are going to talk Man United, Ronaldo, what happened yesterday in that meeting and what's going to happen moving forward, and have Ajax really gone and asked for 100 million euros for Antony? We're delving into that. Plus, we're going to touch on Arsenal. Youri Tielemans agreements trending everywhere across socials. I've not actually read the media report that it's been done, but I see Arsenal fans talking about it. We're going to delve into them as well. Any questions that you've got, do me a favor and smash the like button. Subscribe to the Football Terrace and get your questions in now. But I wanted to, before we move on to Chelsea, and that's a big story today, I wanted to kind of touch base on your understanding of the Ronaldo situation yesterday coming out of Carrington with him returning and seemingly Fergie, David Gill. I saw pictures of Phil Mitchell, the Queen, everybody turning up yesterday at Old Trafford for these crunch talks. Well, what's the latest with Ronaldo, Ben?
Everybody, I think, got quite excited yesterday because they saw Ronaldo enter and shortly after Sir Alex Ferguson. And I think that people wrongly put two and two together and sort of felt like United were bringing in the big guns to really persuade Ronaldo to stay. But Ferguson was there for a scheduled board meeting. And of course, their paths will have crossed. But Ronaldo, I don't think, still wants to be persuaded to stay at Manchester United. And the fact that he drove in with Jorge Mendes rather than just came in and trained still tells you that we're involved in talks rather than training and future rather than football. And that's really important because the situation from Ronaldo's perspective hasn't changed. That what he doesn't want to do is disrupt or overly disrupt Manchester United's pre-season and the early part of their season. The sad reality is that's exactly what has happened and will continue to happen until we get clarity on this. But the talks took place between Ten Hag and Ronaldo, and that is a positive step in the sense that Ten Hag effectively has been blindsided by all of this and hadn't had a serious conversation with Cristiano Ronaldo about his future. But yesterday it was still reiterated that Ronaldo wants to leave, and Manchester United they made their position clear that they do not wish to sell. And United can say that over and over and over again until they're blue in the face and have all of the control until Ronaldo gets a concrete offer. And that is the challenge at the moment. And I think that Mendes needs Manchester United buy-in and flexibility. And the club are understanding of Ronaldo's situation. They know that they've not got Champions League. Everybody can see the age and the frustration as well of Ronaldo of having to carry so much of the burden. But the situation as stands is that if Ronaldo cannot find a permanent move and he does not have a 100% concrete offer at this point, he would like to be loaned out. And that's the next stage in the negotiations right now. So Manchester United are considering whether they might be open to a loan deal. And the challenge of a loan is that if Ronaldo is scoring goals for fun and Manchester United are not, or do not replace him should they loan him out, then that loan is going to come under scrutiny and overshadow Manchester United's season. And yet similarly, if they loan him out and have the option to bring him back and extend beyond that, both of which are ifs, especially considering his age, then should they qualify for Champions League, Ronaldo could make a return and still potentially stay on at Manchester United even longer. But these are all hypotheticals. And ultimately, it's whether Manchester United are prepared to listen to offers that are more financially viable to a suitor, because a loan deal is more preferential at his age and with his cost to some of the clubs that might then be interested. And that could change the dynamic. And I think the other factor in all of this is Ronaldo has said all along it's about Champions League football. And yet circling very vaguely are one or two non-Champions League clubs like Roma. And it would be a real kick in the gut to Manchester United if Ronaldo left anywhere not for Champions League football. because then we know it's about far more than just Champions League football. It's the fact that he doesn't want to play at that football club. So I think Manchester United yesterday, behind closed doors, were very amicable. And they essentially said to Ronaldo, you're a Manchester United player. We expect you to act like one, train like one, and play like one until such point where you have a tangible counter that you can bring to us. And then we will discuss it on its merit. And they reiterated that he's not for sale. And a lot yesterday was also focused on the loan situation and whether that's viable and possible. Now, at the same time, Atleti came out in public and said that they don't know where the links have come from and they are not interested. And clubs will say this in public because even Suter talking about maybe bringing in Ronaldo can disrupt their pre-season and season. And most clubs that would consider Ronaldo may have to offload first, certainly in the case of Atleti. So that's not good for morale. That unsettles your dressing room. So they're bound to reject that. But it's absolutely true that the desire and the appetite for Atleti is all coming from the Ronaldo camp. And Atleti have always, as I've reported, distanced themselves from that link. But they are prepared to investigate it because, like Chelsea, the ownership side, and even to an extent Simeone, sees some benefit. But there's pros and cons to Ronaldo. And as I've said before, he's poison and he's medicine. He can score you goals, but he can disrupt your tactics, your dressing room, your style of play, your chemistry. He can be world-class, but he's 37 years of age. So I think that there was a little bit of headway yesterday in the sense that it was face-to-face and it was amicable, and Manchester United firmly made their position clear. But Ronaldo still came out of that meeting stating that he wants to leave if the right offer comes along.
Yeah, I understand Ronaldo's position. I've said it all summer. I think at the same time, though, there is this rock on this big, fat, hard place of, without being rude to it, no one wants him. Or no one wants him at the price and the money that he's willing to be paid. Nobody wants him at 37 because there is this element. If it was 32, 33, it's different. He's literally in the last couple of years of his career, and I suppose there's that big risk. You put 300, even if it's 350 a week, which I think is what his reduced wages at Man United are at. You put him on 350 a week. He's going to ask for 2 years. If he's bodied, you've seen this happen. You've been around as long as I watch in football. There comes a point, even with the guys that go on into their late 30s, where they just hit a wall. And at 350 grand a week, clubs can't afford to have a player that isn't capable of performing. And he's finding it really hard to move. My issue as a Man United fan is, again, I know that we saw that the big guns turn up yesterday, and it's kind of been briefed now that they were there anyway. There's part of me as a Man United fan that wants to believe it. There's another part of me that says I just don't, and I can't help myself with that no matter who says it. But I just kind of look at it almost like I know he's Ronaldo and he's beyond powerful, but I just don't kind of like the way I don't know, something about the way we're behaving in this. I just feel like we're going to end up rolling over and having our bellies tickled, and I don't want that. The message, we're trying to eradicate player power from the club. And I know this is Cristiano Ronaldo and not some jumped up upstart who's only played 50 times for the club that's like demanding huge wages or something. But I don't know, something about it just leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, really. And I'm worried that it's going to protrude and damage the rest of our window, because you've seen, obviously, we're trying to get the likes of Antony in. There's talks of Dumfries. We know what's going on with the midfield. Do you think the Ronaldo situation is clogging up Man United's other transfers coming in? Do you think it's playing a part in that?
I think it just depends on the position and to some extent the player, if they're box office. Naturally, if Manchester United are putting feelers out there for another attacking option because they're fearful of losing Ronaldo, anyone they talk to is going to say, am I playing with CR7 or without him? And a big name player like De Jong may even ultimately ask the same question, although that is looking increasingly unlikely to Manchester United. And then there's also a type of player that perhaps has options between Champions League and European football and may be lured to Manchester United by Ronaldo if he's there. There's another type of player that will be put off by Ronaldo because they don't want to walk into that kind of environment and dressing room, especially if they're in a competing style position. So don't underestimate the fact that Ronaldo can sell that football club and can destroy that football club. And it's purely down to player preference. And naturally, if I was an attacker that Manchester United were approaching, even if it wasn't out and out in Ronaldo's position, I would be asking, where do I fit in? Am I playing with him or without him? And if without him, who are you replacing him with to make sure that you get into the Champions League next season? So that is a factor. And if he stays, there's a huge amount of players out there that would love to play with Ronaldo in the last few seasons of his career, still at his peak, scoring 20 plus goals or so in the Premier League. So I think he is overshadowing the window and the new Ten Hag era. And it's unfortunate, really, because Ten Hag's walked into all of this. It's not really his fault that Manchester United haven't got a lot of their targets. De Jong is just unlucky in the sense that it's all in Barcelona's control. I don't think that Manchester United have done too much wrong. They've agreed a fee, and then perhaps they should have been more bullish to get player buy-in. So if they weren't to have that genuine desire from De Jong to move to Old Trafford, if they felt they were being played, they could have walked away and moved on to other targets. But I think one of the biggest myths of the window is just that clubs are somehow putting all their energy, time, meetings into only one transfer, and it's plate spinning. So just because Ronaldo's eating up a lot of the media headlines, and just because De Jong is taking various time and negotiation, at least historically, it's kind of tapered off now. And again, it's all on Barcelona now to almost make the final decision and either get De Jong to take that pay cut or force him out the football club. But the reality is that it isn't just one person or one scapegoat or one executive or even one manager taking meetings. Clubs use intermediaries, they use football executives, they've got agents that they're talking to on the phone at the same time as they're taking meetings in person. So don't be remotely surprised if as soon as one saga ends, 3 or 4 start, which tells you that clubs are multitasking, as you would expect during a transfer window. But it's not so much about wasting time on a negotiation or in a meeting with Ronaldo. It's the fact that until there's clarity, there's uncertainty. And as long as there's uncertainty, it disrupts everything. Because if you'd have said to Ten Hag when he first walked through the door, what's your starting 11 now, either ideally with new signings or based on who you're inheriting for the first game of the season, Ronaldo was probably the first name he puts on the team sheet. And now he's not yet had a full pre-season training session. He's not bedded him in with Christian Eriksen. He's not worked out how Bruno, Eriksen, Ronaldo work together. Can they all play together? And then if a midfielder comes in, what's the system? What's the dynamic? Who goes where? Does one of the players have to go wider? Or is it a case that they can't all play together? And he doesn't know the answers. And not knowing the answers means that Manchester United are almost behind in their pre-season. So then they start the season and they may not be able to start Ronaldo. And then that means that you have less of a goal threat, more of a reliance on, say, Anthony Martial or Bruno or the creativity of Christian Eriksen. And then at the same time, I think Ten Hag's come in and he's unhappy with the speed of the team. He's unhappy with the kind of energy and the hunger. So he's trying to change the mentality. He's trying to change the style. He's trying to make it more Dutch, which is why he's going for tried and tested players where he possibly can. And yet there's Ronaldo lingering and saying he doesn't want to damage Manchester United, but every single second there is not full clarity, he is damaging Manchester United, and that's the problem.
And you're spot on, Ben. And, you know, I said it yesterday. I've been called out by a lot of top Reds in the last 24 hours. How dare you have a go at Ronaldo? Listen, I love Ronaldo, but I'm a Man United fan. And one of the quotes yesterday that triggered me was he wants to leave, but he says he'll still act professionally. He hasn't been professional all summer. He hasn't gone to pre-season. He hasn't been training. Ronaldo didn't need to stay at home. Listen, there's fingers crossed. There was nothing wrong, seriously wrong with anybody in his family or anything along those lines. Like there's hope and pray. There's nothing bad like that. But my gut feeling just tells me he stayed at home because they were hoping to force a move. He should have been at pre-season training. And yes, Mendes could still be out there talking to people. You don't need Ronaldo for that. You could have gone to Australia. You could have gone to Bangkok. You could be ready to start the season, but you're not. And that for me can't be. I don't care whether you're Cristiano Ronaldo or if you're Chong. For me, I think the standard should be the same for everybody. And that's my fear within this, that Ronaldo's behavior rubs off on people. And we've seen that, Ben, over the last 9 years. One person gets away with something, somebody else starts doing it. This person starts leaking details. This person starts doing it. And I just don't, you know, there's so much to fix at the club. There's so many problems. It was always going to be a tough summer. We were never going to get all our signings done in the first 2 or 3 weeks, sign 4 world-class players who were giving up Champions League football and challenging for league titles elsewhere. We knew that. But you don't need this added mess. In terms of one of the people linked to replacing him, Antony, we saw reports last night from the likes of Sam Pilger, who obviously works at the Athletic, and amongst others, that Ajax were ready to lower their asking price, that the deal was advancing, the deal was becoming closer, but based on the fact they were willing to lower that asking price because a player wants to leave. That this morning, though, has been refuted by the kind of Dutch press, who are now saying, no, they've actually, instead of lowering it, they've gone from 80 million euros to 100 million euros. What's your kind of understanding or feeling towards this Antony deal and this ever-changing asking price?
I think that Manchester United are struggling to agree a fee, and my understanding is more what we're hearing out of the Ajax media, that the price has been raised to try and ward off suitors. And that's understandable, because in the early part of the window, you open the door to a sale, especially if there's buy-in from the player to leave. And then you get closer to the season and you start shutting the door, because you start to sense an eventuality where your squad isn't broken up and your stars remain. And I think we're going to see something reasonably similar with Leicester City as well, with some of their top names, where there'll be plenty of interest, but the prices will be spiked up well above market value. And let's not forget that the Ajax manager is on record talking about Antony and Manchester United's interest, saying that internally, that's a key word, we've agreed, we want to keep the current squad together. Nobody wants to sell him. And what that means is that, first of all, discussions internally within Ajax have come to a universal conclusion that the club can be more bullish, and with that, the price will go up. And secondly, Manchester United would be reliant upon the player trying to force his way out, because Ajax simply don't want to sell unless they get an offer that is simply too good to refuse. And in that context, that's why the price goes up, not down. Yet, I think the other factor that sometimes fans forget is that we're at a really intriguing sense of the window, because when you get into the opening of the window, a lot of the players are still off and the sporting directors are working in private. And then you get to pre-season and still it's behind closed doors. And now they start doing their first interviews and managers cannot hide anymore. So therefore, we're getting a lot more on record now and probably last week comparative to any other point during the window, and it will continue. And that adds a new twist and gamesmanship, because they cannot dodge the questions. So when you then hear a manager say, I don't want to sell, he's our player, and we're getting this a lot, like the chairman of Leicester saying that there's no formal offers for Tielemans, which is correct to my understanding as of date. Edu saying, oh yeah, Rafinha was always off to Barcelona. And it's like, well, of course, now you say that. But at the time, as I understand it, that Arsenal were bidding before Chelsea entered the race, they did not know that, which is why they were formulating a bid. And then a few weeks later, they were left hanging after Chelsea bid. And now they've shifted their narrative to, it was always Barcelona. So that's why we decided just to back off. And that's very neat. It's PR, but it's to be taken with a pinch of salt, much in the same way that when Laporta says something to the media. So what we get is a new perspective, and perhaps fans like to just go with what the manager says, because there it is on record, straight from the horse's mouth. And Ajax's perspective on record remains that Antony is not a player they want to sell, and thus there is a high asking price. If Manchester United, as the window progresses, come in with an offer that's too good to refuse, then Ajax will still sell. I don't see it quite being 100 million euros, but I do see it being relatively astronomical. I think it's going to take 85 or 90 million euros to really get Ajax reconsidering their position, which is why I think that Manchester United are no longer confident that they can get Antony.
That's an interesting take on it, and a very informed one as well, as we know. And it's one of those things for me where what you just said there, mate, when managers come out and say things, it's always funny to me, because we know that Ten Hag keeps saying Ronaldo's not for sale. It's not for sale at the right price. That what I read about Atletico yesterday, before they refuted things, is that they're willing to do it, but they don't want to pay a transfer fee. Now, again, I think if they come to Man United and say, we're going to give you nothing for Ronaldo, there's an element of, no, we're not doing that. But again, what people say publicly and what they do in reality are often two very, very different things, and whatever else. And the thing with Antony, I would say, and it's, again, for a United fan, it's frustrating. He might be pushing for the move privately, but he's doing nothing publicly that suggests he wants to go. He isn't refusing to train. He isn't going on a strike. He isn't. And I've always felt I don't really want players that do that, because if they do it to come to your club, they've got it in their nature to do it to get out your club as well. So I'd rather people toe that party line, as it were. But viewers, what do you think about these deals, Ronaldo and Antony? We want your thoughts and we want your feelings. A few of you in the comments are saying, well, this isn't really new news. That isn't the point of it, though. New news is trending. We asked Ben to give us his take on it. If it's the same thing Ben said last week, that's because nothing's changed and he's re-updating you to reaffirm you. It's not repeating himself. It's giving you an update. Relax a little bit, people. I know it's been warm recently. I know some of you are frustrated with your club's transfer windows, but Ben is just giving us the news as he knows it and what he's been told. So relax your brains a little bit, people. Make sure the like button is being smashed as well. If we hit 1,250 likes in the stream, we will give away 20 free memberships to you. Now, Ben, look, the situation with Chelsea is ever-changing, very interesting. One of the sort of the big pieces of breaking news this morning is that Kimpembe has rejected Chelsea. Now, I'm not sure whether that's official yet. I'm not sure whether that's fed through to yourself. But Kimpembe to Chelsea, is that a deal that's likely to sort of fade away and go away now? Or is there still hope for Chelsea in this?
Well, as I reported yesterday and last week, Kimpembe wants to stay in Paris. So it's absolutely no surprise that things are heading in this direction, because PSG sources have always intimated that Kimpembe is very settled. And don't be surprised if the interest in him actually translates to a one-year contract extension. His contract expires in 2024, and it is very possible that PSG, actually being happy with him and still seeing the player as integral to their plans, use all of this buzz and interest to get him to tie down and sign for another year. And one of the challenges with dealing with PSG is the fact that they've got a new sporting director and a new manager. And Christophe Galtier has developed a very strong early relationship with Kimpembe. And as I reported, I think 2 weeks ago, it was told to me that Kimpembe will have the final say, which means whether or not a fee is agreed, it will then go to Kimpembe. And if he says, no, I want to stay, then PSG will say, okay, regardless of what the fee is. Now, Chelsea have been in talks with PSG and they haven't yet been able to agree a fee either. The slight positive for Chelsea is that Kimpembe has always been more open to a Chelsea move than historically he was to Juventus before they turned their attention to other targets. So that's good news. And one of the reasons for that is because I think he feels that the Premier League, rather than only Chelsea, might be of some appeal. But fundamentally, he's had a good preseason. He's happy in Paris. And my understanding is that he has always intimated to the club, not only in the last 24 hours, but really for the last 2 weeks, that in an ideal scenario, he would like to stay in Paris. So that's why Chelsea have a challenge. They would have to, first of all, agree a fee with PSG, which is not a given. And they might be paying above market value if PSG hold out. And then they would still have to convince the player. So I think as things stand, it's looking unlikely. And that is not new news. This is something that I said last week and the week before, that in the negotiations for defenders, Kimpembe was always a challenge because it was about convincing the player. And the player has consistently reiterated, not for the last 24 hours, not for the last week, but since Chelsea came to the table, that his preference, even though he was understanding of a new manager and a new sporting director, was to stay at PSG. And it's helped him, therefore, that he's got such a strong relationship with Galtier. And that's the complication, really, in all of this, that I think if Pochettino was still there, he was more intent to work with Campos to make Kimpembe one of the outgoings. But Galtier's got a fresh perspective. And having seen Kimpembe in the early weeks of pre-season, he likes him a lot. And that makes a transfer for Chelsea very, very challenging. Still not entirely impossible, but I think Chelsea are well aware that they do not, at the time of recording, have buy-in from the player.
Yeah, I mean, I think it must be, I can sense, I mean, the performance at the weekend, the Kounde deal, which, you know, as you reported, Matt Law reported, we obviously make the content based on it, that Chelsea really felt that deal was done, or going to complete, formalities, etc., and hasn't happened as of now. I'm sure we'll get an update on that. Kimpembe, we knew that Chelsea fans knew it wasn't like as far gone, or is not that Kounde was simplistic, but like it was less chance of it. But to sort of in the space of a week not have either of them, what's kind of next for Chelsea? Because we have heard Fofana, but surely Fofana is going to be a very difficult player to get away from Leicester City, especially after recently signing a new deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have good knowledge of Leicester's workings, and it's absolutely true that Leicester do need to generate some money. But by the same token, they haven't signed anybody this window, and they've got outgoings that they didn't expect, particularly if Kasper Schmeichel does end up joining Nice. Leicester will want to find a replacement first. And it's funny with Fofana because he's been on a lot of clubs' radar for a long, long time. And that's because, once again, as some fans don't quite appreciate due to the intricacies of transfer windows, and notice I use a plural, clubs are working multiple windows ahead. So you may inquire about Fofana now with a view to next summer or even longer. And I've said many times that the day Erling Haaland joins Man City or Darwin Núñez joins Liverpool, there is a whole group of people that instantly on day one draw up a shortlist to replace those players, which sounds staggering, but this is one of the parts of the window that people don't understand. So the interest is there, and Chelsea and Manchester United have looked at Fofana for a long, long time. Fofana was on a Chelsea shortlist, loosely speaking, under the old regime as well. Why? Because he's a top quality defender at the right age with a huge amount of potential. But he only signed a contract extension at Leicester in March. So Leicester have got all of the control here. And I reported a month ago that Leicester's position was crystal clear. They do not want to sell Fofana, and they won't even listen to an offer, regardless of if they need finances, for under £70 million. And that is the minimum. That's not the accepted amount. That's not a figure that will definitely facilitate a sale. It is a minimum, and they will dismiss anything below that at this stage. So an all-in package of probably more like a Harry Maguire fee to Manchester United might get conversations going. And to date, Chelsea haven't made any direct contact with Leicester City. The interest is there for sure, but they've not done anything with it yet. It could move over the course of the next few hours or days. Chelsea may see some opportunism because of Leicester's financial situation. And people said to me yesterday when I posted that, well, that's not new news. And it's not new news because I reported it a month ago in exactly the same terms. And I was first to report it a month ago about the 70 million, about the desire of Brendan Rodgers not to sell. And guess who liked the post? Wesley Fofana himself, which usually tells you that there is some kind of acceptance on the player's part that you can read it two ways. He either knows what his worth is, which is probably the less likely reading of it, or alternatively, he endorses the fact that Leicester City Football Club want to keep him and he wants to stay. So that's what makes it challenging. It's never going to be impossible because, and I say this as a Leicester fan, Chelsea are a bigger club than Leicester. And we saw this with Chilwell and Drinkwater and Kante. And even when Chelsea had an interest in Mahrez, even though they didn't get him, some fans might remember when he tried to leave the Algeria camp to force a move to Chelsea and Leicester just put their foot down. So it's one to watch during the window. But if Chelsea are to do anything with it, then first of all, Leicester would have to completely U-turn on a not-for-sale stance. And that is even more difficult because Leicester was so defensively thin last season that to lose another one will be of huge concern to Brendan Rodgers. And Chelsea will have to pay an astronomical price because Leicester always get good business. So personally, only my opinion, but it is obviously informed by talking to sources. I think this one is unlikely, but let's see whether Chelsea move over the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like with Chelsea, I mean, there were links a couple of days ago to the Leipzig centre-backs. We know that like Todd Bowley is being sort of on a European tour trying to sign people. Could they get to a point, do you feel? Is there any noise that Chelsea might get to a stage where they, I don't want to say panic because Wesley Fofana is a very, very good player. But could they get to a point where they just go, right, we need someone. Okay, look, there's £90 million just to get the deal done. Could do you envisage that happening?
I don't think so because ultimately, let's not forget, Chelsea have got Levi Colwell. It's a big ask to throw him in. And they've got two centre-backs, at least in the form of Koulibaly and Silva. What's challenging, I think, is just that Thomas Tuchel is trying to change the formation, not permanently, but he wants the option of being able to play a back three and a back four. And he needs that depth and versatility to do it. And an injury or two, and suddenly Chelsea will be very, very thin defensively. I mean, they already are, and even more so if they let Azpilicueta go to Barcelona. So there's some hurdles that Chelsea need to overcome, both in terms of delaying their outgoings for players that they might be prepared to leave, particularly Azpilicueta, and then finding the right target. It's not panic buy stage of the window. I think it's important to make that clear. That comes in the last week, and you get a lot more merry-go-round movement. And the panic isn't only in relation to the buying club, it's also selling clubs that are hoping to offload because they need the fee or they've got a replacement lined up, and they might soften on their stance. So I don't just see Chelsea reaching into their pocket and finding 80, 90 million if they know the player to be worth 50 or 60 million. That's not good business sense. I suspect that what will happen is that Chelsea will just continue to balance a high volume of targets. And that high volume comes from the fact they're not just looking for one, they're hoping for two. And this is why we're seeing so many names. And they will make headway eventually. And I use eventually very loosely because we're still only basically halfway through the window. We're still 2 weeks away from the season. And I've said this before, that you obviously want to get in more than Chelsea have got in at this point. But you don't want to bring in everybody by day one of pre-season, because managers like to look at the core 2 or 3 they've got against the existing squad and then use pre-season to work out the dynamic and the chemistry. And that informs their decision on who they then go for later in the window. So Thomas Tuchel doesn't want everyone in, but it's obvious that the names that we've already heard considered that Chelsea have missed out on, like Delete, for example, were prioritized on their radar. So they have to turn their attention to other targets. Gvardiol is tough because Leipzig are hard negotiators and there's plenty of interest in the player as well. But I think that Chelsea fans are almost panicking. One, because they saw their side get absolutely thrashed in pre-season by Arsenal and the defensive liabilities were exposed. And even if pre-season results don't matter, Thomas Tuchel was frustrated as well. So there's definitely a feeling of, well, now we've actually seen the squad and we don't think that we're anywhere close to narrowing the gap on Man City and Liverpool. And if anything, Chelsea fans are worried about looking over their shoulder at the moment. So that's one reason for the panic. And then there's this notion of, well, are the new ownership group up to the negotiation side? But remember that Bruce Buck's still there as a senior advisor and Marina is not a director anymore, but she's still available as needed and facilitating introductions and advice where necessary. So Chelsea are not only reliant on Todd Boehly, but it is absolutely true that they've missed out on a few targets, and that is breeding a pessimism, I would say, amongst the fan base at the moment. But still, judge Chelsea come the first game of the season and then judge Chelsea at the end of the window. And by the end of the window, I still expect them to have brought 5 or 6 in.
Yeah. I think that's, I think, as you say, there's still like a good few weeks of the window to go. There's players to leave. And I think one of the players linked with an exit from Chelsea is Timo Werner, which could help spark things along, which we'll touch on. In terms of Jules Kounde, really quickly, it feels like he's Barca bound now, but I mean, how close did Chelsea get to sort of securing the player? Because there are so many reports, and I don't wish to speak disrespectfully of certain journalists. I've seen some that were, on the same line as you, like it's very close to happening, who then a few days later were like, oh, actually, well, it was a lot further away than we actually thought. And I'm like, I saw your tweets, mate. I saw your article. I don't really know what you're talking about. Like, you put it out there and it happened. How close were Chelsea, in your opinion, Ben, to getting that deal over the line?
Yeah, let's talk about Kounde. I believe in being open and honest about these things. And it is very easy to bash on Twitter, and the mood changes so quickly on social media. And the reality of the situation is that Chelsea thought they were very close to Kounde, to the point where it was only formalities that remained, and things changed unexpectedly and dramatically. And you'll notice in my case, I leave the tweets up. And the reason for that is because this is the chaos of the transfer window. And I don't think that journalists should, one, hide what they've reported, and two, when asked why things change, I think they should be open and honest and respectfully explain the position. And fans will take glee at times at saying you were wrong, calling you a fraud, Barcelona fans will celebrate. But the reality of dealing with Barcelona is smokescreen and mirrors. And even if you look at the Barcelona narrative for Rafinha and Kounde from the Spanish perspective, nothing that's been said is correct, because they've told us that a deal is agreed. It hasn't been. They've told us it's 99% done. It isn't. They told us it would be done by Sunday. It wasn't. They told us it would be done by Monday. It wasn't. They told us it would be done by Tuesday. It wasn't. So things are not as they seem. And as a journalist, that is why you go to multiple sources. So from my perspective, a week or so ago, I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head, Chelsea went to Sevilla and had a verbal agreement for around 55 million, pending only structure and formalities. And I reported that. Then, at the same time, Jules Kounde made it clear to Sevilla and Chelsea that he did not want to travel to Portugal. At that point, Chelsea put into activation the protocol for a move, and Sevilla put into activation their exit protocol as well. And Chelsea's expectation at that point was that the player would travel to London, was open to the move, had agreed personal terms that were long-standing, and would move to Chelsea Football Club. So then what you do as a journalist to try and explain is you go to Chelsea, you get that tape verified as far as the verbals, the progression on the negotiations, only the formalities. You go to Sevilla, you get told exactly the same thing. And then you go to Barcelona. And of course, even the most fervent of Barca journalists at the same point were saying that they were walking away and that a deal was impossible. So you report that. Then, of course, within a matter of hours, Xavi makes a call directly to the player, at which point the player U-turns and decides that he won't play in Portugal, but he's prepared to go to Portugal. Barcelona activate their second lever, and suddenly impossible becomes not impossible. So you must then report on the unexpected twist. And of course, some people, and I respect this, will say, well, the journalists will jump the gun. But we are trying to give you the blow by blow. And if three sources, particularly a Barcelona source, are all on the same page, you report that to the best of your knowledge. But in the transfer window, things can change. So now we're in a position where Jules Kounde believes that Barcelona will strike a deal, and it's stalled as far as Chelsea are concerned. And one of the reasons for that, by the way, is because, as I've reported previously, Sevilla were always hoping for an offer from Barcelona because they wanted to leverage that against Chelsea. And then when Sevilla, in the formality process, thought that Barcelona may come back into the race, they asked Chelsea for certain things. And at that point, Chelsea did not provide any written guarantees or paperwork. And then suddenly we get this narrative that it was never close. And that's normal, by the way. Another myth in the transfer window is that it's either bid or not bid. Sometimes it's a bid and a verbal agreement and nothing happens, and both clubs then deny it, which is why sometimes you hear it's the first bid, a second bid, a third bid, and actually you never know, because what constitutes a bid if it's not formal and in writing? And 99 times out of 100, things start verbal. But anyway, look, Chelsea thought the deal was done. I hold my hands up and say that's what I reported. I don't believe that was wrong at the time of reporting. But then Xavi called Kounde, and now Barcelona are in control in terms of a head-to-head against Chelsea. But the situation is not as clear-cut as they're saying in Spain, because Sevilla are still saying that they will hold out for the same amount that Chelsea were prepared to pay. They want something in the region of 65 million euros. And Barcelona are looking with a different structure to try and pay something more, like 45 million euros, plus maybe around 10 million add-ons. So they're short. So Barcelona are getting very excited that it's done. Of course, if it gets over the line, they will all celebrate and say that it was always done. It was always 99%. But they do not have yet, even if they're making progress, even if they're confident, they do not have an agreement, a fee, nothing in principle yet agreed with Sevilla. And until they get a more competitive offer, Sevilla at least are saying they won't. Now, there may be some gamesmanship. I accept that, because the longer the window goes on and it drags on and the more the player wants to leave, then the more leverage perhaps Barcelona will have, as we saw with Rafinha. But by the same token, he is contracted at the football club until 2024. And that does give Monchi, an extremely tough negotiator, no nonsense, always tends to get his way, a lot of control as well. So the short answer, if I ever give one, is that Barcelona is still looking more likely, certainly, than Chelsea, but Sevilla are playing hard ball. And even if a agreement is close and progressing, and some would say likely, it is not 100% there yet. And that's basically what happened. One of the craziest sagas you'll see in the window, lots of smoke screens, lots of competing narratives. And I like to leave everything up there. Even if when he signs for Barcelona, or if he signs for Barcelona, an old tweet gets retweeted and you get hammered for it, so be it. But that is the reality. And I don't think journalists should hide from what they reported. I think they should just explain with honesty and decency why the narrative changed. And you either believe that or you don't.
Well, this is the thing, Ben. I appreciate that breakdown. And, you know, like because I've sent you private messages. Like I respect your take on things, your honesty, the things you get right. I love the way you break things down. We've spoken about this, and it's important because understanding the ebb and the flow, the peaks and troughs, the problem fans have, I think, in their heart of hearts, is they want to blame someone, and people don't really like to blame their own club. And what I mean by that is, based on what you've just said there, like, Barcelona obviously said, "Oh, we're pulling away." They were smoke and mirrors. At the same time, Chelsea kind of briefing that they really feel like this is going to happen. It's not the journalist's fault for reporting on that. It's the club. they gave the wrong information. Like, they didn't give the wrong information, but the information they gave didn't pan out. And I think that's what I kind of look at here. It isn't about. It's all I see on socials now is people trying to catch journalists out, and I'm sort of like, but they're just giving you what you want to know in that moment at that particular time of things going on. Like we literally, like, I'm not a journalist, but last night I recorded the video quite late when I set this place up, and the report last night was that Ajax are willing to drop the fee. So I put all the screenshots, the articles, the extract, the journal, I put all the sources on the screen, talk about it, give my opinion on it, finish the video. Goes out this morning. 2 hours after my video gets released, Mark Vaval comes out and says something different. I then get attacked for spreading misinformation. I'm like, I didn't do anything. I'm literally reporting. I will also report, like we're doing now, on what Mark Vaval said. It's 100 million euros. It's almost just a case of, I don't get some football fans. I don't kind of get what they really want. You either want to know what's going on in that moment or report on the news, or just wait for the club player to be holding the shirt on the club's website and then, like, kill this whole thing off. Like, I think it's almost like fans want both, don't they? They want their cake and eat it. They want day by day updates, but they only want the updates to be what they want to hear, which is weird to me. It's weird to me.
Just add that as we develop as journalists and gain reputations, we're naturally trusted. So I understand why fans get more excited. The higher rated or more credible an organization or individual is, the more likely when we lean towards or fully report towards a deal, everybody gets excited. So when Fabrizio says, "Here we go," then people see that as done rather than just his reporting of it. And 99 times out of 100, because he's brilliant as both an individual and a guy as well, he works with us at CBS, his information is spot on. But sometimes deals can get hijacked, they can change, they can alter, and you can follow the window day on day. And what always makes me laugh about social media is that you get a lot of flack saying, "Why are you reporting on it if it's not done? Why are you reporting on it if it's only speculative? Why are you reporting on it if there's no change in the news?" And then 2 minutes later, you write something like I did yesterday around "Congratulations, Lionesses," and 50 of the comments are "Kounde news, Kounde news, Kounde news, Kounde news."
Yeah.
So you're going to get a slight contradiction there. And all I really ask is that people are respectful, because I've been in this game for 20 odd years. And one of the reasons why now I can report on a transfer window is because I'm at CBS as a reporter. Whereas over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been embedded as a consultant doing things like strategy, digital transformation, commercial growth, and even football side of things with various clubs, either directly or through agencies. So naturally, you meet the execs, you develop the contacts, but you can't do anything with it, because if I'm in a football club, and you can't name these football clubs, but I can tell you that they're all in top European leagues that I've worked with, because I was contracted to agencies in the past during my time living full-time in North America. And you learn things, but you're never going to report on them. And the reason for that is because you're either under NDA or it's not your job. Now my job again is to report on the window. So I'm reporting on the window, and I do that to the best of my ability. And you can follow or not follow. You can agree or disagree. But all I ask, because I always try to be, and I do my best to engage where possible, is that everyone is respectful. So take if somebody is wrong, be witty about it, be funny about it, make a joke about it. But as soon as it gets personal, as soon as you turn into a faceless troll, as soon as you write disrespectful things in the comments, then not only are you doing yourself no favors, but you are disincentivizing every journalist to actually engage back with you and give you what you want to hear.
Of course. I mean, even with Fabrizio, like people call him a tap-in merchant. He only waits until it's actually 100% over the line before he tweets. He doesn't go out on a limb early. Well, he's earned the right not to, because if he goes early and it doesn't pan out because a club changes its mind, a player changes its mind, there's an injury, then, I mean, look at the stick he got last year. When he's basically, all he did was reiterate what Inter had said, that it's impossible that Lukaku leaves, and then he did. Oh, you're a fraud. It's not Fabrizio Romano's fault that the club and the player changed their mind. Like honestly, it's crazy to me. But no, listen, I totally get where you're coming from, mate. We've got some super chats here. First of all, Elliot, thank you for becoming an official member of the Football Terrace. It means a great deal. This says this guy is the most level-headed and certainly the top 3. Spits facts only. It's a nice compliment. I assume he's talking about you, Ben. Definitely talking about me.
Like you.
Everyone keeps using the term. He's always open to a move when really the player isn't. As long as money talks, loyalty walks. It's an open window. I mean, to a degree, yeah. I mean, listen, if Fofana got offered 800 grand a week to go to Chelsea today, he's asking to leave. Like it's probably going to happen that way. The question here that says, Ben, how are you feeling about Leicester right now?
Panicked, to be honest. And I think the only saving grace is that in Brendan Rodgers, we've got a very good manager to navigate what's a tricky situation. Leicester's issue is that those back-to-back seasons where they didn't qualify for the Champions League, coupled with no European football, have put the club in a tricky position. And it's required a clear-out under financial fair play because they need to get their wage bill down. And when you unexpectedly win the Premier League, get to a quarter-final of the Champions League, and then nearly make the Champions League in back-to-back seasons, the players all get bonuses and the wage bill becomes high. So then when you look at Kasper Schmeichel or Jamie Vardy, those type of players have constantly been bumped up, and it's very hard to get them to take pay cuts. And when you're Leicester, unlike Manchester United, you can't say your wage goes back down if you don't make Europe, because Leicester's players would expect a bonus or something anyway if they just finish in the top half, because that's a good season for Leicester City. And if they miss out on the Champions League but hit Europa League, they would also expect a bonus because that is above expectations as well. Anything for Leicester City historically, 6th or better, and it's bonus time. And therefore, whether that's individual bonus or team bonus, the finances have crept up and up and up. And this is why they need to clear out with some of their veteran or higher earning players. So that's the challenge. Schmeichel is obviously close to Nice. Leicester need a replacement first. I know there's some talk of a hijack for the Leno to Fulham deal. It remains to be seen whether that progresses. And then the kind of challenge is that Leicester probably need a star or two to go, which could be good news for Chelsea. But for the reasons I've already given, Fofana specifically is way down the list of players that they want to sell. But I think that Tielemans is ideally a player that they would like to get that 25 or 30 million from, just so they can start moving in the market, because he's the one that they've privately accepted, doesn't really want to sign and can go this window. And then Harvey Barnes is a really interesting one because Leicester's position is that he's a £50 million player, and Newcastle have inquired for about half of that fee. And Leicester are either pricing him out the market, or there may be some scope to come to a common ground there, not specifically for Newcastle because there's nothing crazily advanced there, but generally they might be open to him, but I still think he's way down the list. I think the two that Leicester would consider right now with big money on them is Tielemans, I suppose not huge money, but big money comparative to what's left in the contract, and then James Maddison. And if a Spurs up their interest and make an offer, he's a player I think that would be pretty open to leaving the King Power Stadium, especially to go and play Champions League football. So it's tough for Leicester. They need incomings. They lack depth. They could get sucked deeply into the bottom half of the table. If Vardy doesn't score, they're going to be very, very reliant on someone else stepping up. Iheanacho's been patchy. Perez finished the season with a good couple of goals off the bench against Southampton, but hasn't found his Newcastle form. They are happy with the midfield. The defence, when it's fit, is fine, but very thin when it isn't. And they need to resolve the goalkeeper situation as well. So Leicester are going to have a busy second half of the window, but if they don't start this season well, then they could easily get sucked somewhere near the relegation zone, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's going to be an intriguing. I didn't realize I hadn't signed anybody until I started, because I haven't really focused on any of the other clubs outside the top six. I start doing that this time of the year as we gear up for the start of the season. I'm like, Forest have signed about 47 people and Leicester have signed no one. It's crazy. It really is crazy. Just before we move on to Arsenal and talking about this Tielemans situation, there's a question here, but then I kind of want to go into Werner with this as well. But it says, I don't understand why Chelsea have walked away. I think they're talking about Kounde when they basically agreed a fee in personal terms. Have Chelsea fully walked away, or are they kind of taken a back step? What would you say that the truth is surrounding that?
I think it's a tactic. They've learned their lesson from Rafinha and Barcelona. And if they are now aware by talking to the player that having U-turned and gone to Portugal, he's waiting on a Barca offer, there's really nothing more that Chelsea can do. And the other factor, as I said before, is just Monchi. And if the goalpost moved during a negotiation that was a verbal agreement pending formalities to a situation where, due to a Barca revived interest, Monchi wants more, or to move the goalposts. And this is one of the factors that is difficult with negotiations, that it's not like Championship Manager where you just bid a fee. The structure, the add-ons, the payment terms are really important. So Chelsea wanted to pay their fee in 4 installments, and Barcelona verbally in early negotiations were talking about a lower overall fee but paid in 2 installments. So then, of course, Monchi can suddenly go to Chelsea and say, oh yeah, we were only negotiating with you and we kind of had the structure of an agreement and just the formalities, and that's why the player didn't go to Portugal originally anyway. Now, by the way, we want a little bit more because Barca are in, and we want it in 2 installments, not 4. At which point Chelsea say, we'll go away and think about it. And then no verbal amendment or formal offer after that verbal agreement ever came. So it's stalled as far as Chelsea are concerned. And the narrative is now that they were always undecided on Kounde, and that they thought about him and then they turned to other targets and then they revisited him, and now they're looking at their options again. So I think that nobody ever says never in a window, because if Barcelona don't reach an agreement with Sevilla for Kounde, then Chelsea have opportunism to swoop in with a lower offer or the existing offer and say, take it or leave it, we're your only option at this point. And Sevilla may at that point change their mind. And this is the sort of seesawing of the window. But for now, Chelsea are not doing anything because they cannot do any more. They've made their position clear to Sevilla. They've made their position clear to Kounde. It has been intimated to Chelsea that Kounde has full buy-in of personal terms to join Barcelona and is now waiting on Barcelona to thrash out a deal, which means that much like Rafinha, after Chelsea had an offer accepted with Leeds, they're forced to wait a little bit and revisit it over the coming days. And Todd Boehly has said with every single deal, he doesn't want things dragging out. So I think that Chelsea are distant from it at the moment, but you never, ever, ever in a window say never categorically. You never say no, because if you say no, then if you want the player again, the player remembers that. And as we move on to Tielemans, it's a good segue, because if Arsenal were to say no to Tielemans now, you're not our priority anymore, you're off our list. Then if they change their mind in a week or 2 or a month or on the last day of the window, Tielemans remembers that. And if there's another offer offset against that, then the player thinks, well, the club didn't really want me. The club messed me around. The club said no, then yes. So you always keep your options open. I always compare it to a job interview where you get down to your final 2 candidates and you tell both of them that they're great and they're in the running. And you have a number 1 and a number 2. And you go to your number 1 and you make them a job offer. And then you wait for that number 1 to accept the job offer, then to sign the contract, then to give their notice. Then you go to the rejected candidate and you say, thanks very much, but actually we've decided to go in a different direction. But if you went to the rejected job candidate immediately when the first candidate accepted and said, sorry, you've not got the job, And then for whatever reason, the first candidate got another offer from his existing employer, or didn't sign the contract, or wasn't able to leave, or had personal circumstances. When you then go back to your secondary candidate, you're in big, big trouble, because at that point they've already been rejected by you, and maybe they've looked elsewhere, or maybe they just don't feel as incentivized because they don't like the idea that they were your second choice. And that's kind of how the balancing of targets works during a transfer window as well.
Which makes perfect sense. I've said for years, as you say, it's spinning those plates. It's working on multiple deals at once. It's essentially what clubs would love is their priority 1, 2, and 3 targets to all say yes, all want to join, and then you get the pick of the bunch. And the same can be said for players. Players love having, oh look, Man United want me, Arsenal want me. I'm happy with both their offers. I've accepted the I know personal terms abroad, but I've accepted the quote unquote personal terms. I now just need to make my decision, which is why when it comes to, like, obviously I'm a football fan content creator. So I created my version of transfer emojis, because I still think there's a difference between deals between clubs being agreed and deals completing. And I kind of don't like this notion that once a deal's agreed, it's going to happen, because I've seen so many, and this summer is a prime example of fees being agreed between clubs, but deals not happening. So for me, like, there's a stage process to this. And it's only through my time working in banking where it was like, well, I've agreed deals. I always give this story. We agreed. It wasn't my deal. I was just part of the party. A guy agreed like a £7 million deal with a bank to provide them with like a deal. Anyway, it was worth a big deal. It's hard to explain what it was about. I still laughed at it. We went out on a Friday night. We went up we started in the Ned, and we went to a number of different bars and clubs and stuff in the city. And on the company credit card, £7,500 was spent. It was a big night. Monday morning, that same bank, they pulled out the deal. And my colleague, who was actually my boss, right, he had to then go and explain, yeah, we did £7,500 on expenses, but you know that £7-8 million deal with it's off. It was a very painful moment. So in my life, I've experienced those things firsthand. But on Youri Tielemans, before I digress further, I keep seeing it. I'm searching for this story. I can't find it. I keep seeing agreed. I keep seeing Arsenal has a tweet. It's agreed. It's getting close. What's going on with this deal? I mean, is it any closer than it was a week ago, or are we still where we are? The player wants to join, but no offer's been made. That's my reading of the situation.
Yeah, there's no offer formally that's been made for Youri Tielemans for any club yet to Leicester City, and there hasn't been throughout the entire transfer window. And I think that suitors are just biding their time at the moment. Arsenal have been in contact with Tielemans' camp for absolutely months, but their priority will be the outgoings first, and then they'll decide whether there's space for Tielemans or another kind of player that ticks that sort of, loosely speaking, attacking midfielder or creative player role, or a deeper lying goal scorer. So Tielemans is on Arsenal's radar. He'd love to join Arsenal. Arsenal haven't made any formal bids, so any reports of an agreement at the time of recording are incorrect. Arsenal have gone through intermediaries to discuss a price with Leicester City over the course of the last month or so to test the water as to what that might be. That's normal practice during a window. But Arsenal, I don't think, will swoop formally for Tielemans until, first of all, Arteta has decided what the balance is, and second of all, outgoings are prioritised first. And one key name to look at is Granit Xhaka. Arsenal haven't made any decision on him yet, but perhaps Xhaka going might open the door to a Tielemans. But regardless of Tielemans' position, because Zinchenko can play in midfield, Vieira's come in and is a midfielder as well, general outgoings are more important to Arsenal over the course of the next week or so. And then as the season starts and we get into the final 3 weeks of the window, that's when they'll make these final determinations. So Tielemans is there for the taking for Arsenal if they want him, but they haven't as yet formally moved with Leicester City, and nor have Manchester United, and nor have Newcastle. Newcastle's interest is the weakest out of those three clubs. Manchester United may turn to a player like Tielemans if they categorically rule out the De Jong deal. And then with Arsenal's outgoings, just briefly, there's a few things to say, really. Saka's untouchable. They expect him to sign a new contract, and that protects future sell-on value anyway. And when you hear these rumours of like Manchester City and Saka or Liverpool and Saka, it tends to be clubs working windows ahead. And if Saka, who's very happy at Arsenal, signs a new contract, it gives Arsenal the ability to lock him down, and it protects any sell-on value if and when in future windows any bids come in. Saliba's an interesting one. I've said many, many times that it's about convincing the player. Arteta would love to keep him, very impressed by his time in Marseille, but Marseille would also like to re-sign him. And Sampaoli, when he exited Marseille, was very, very frustrated with the fact that the club didn't fight harder to re-sign him instantly. So Saliba's an interesting one because Arteta absolutely wants to keep him, very impressed with him during pre-season, and yet it's all about telling the player what his role is going to be and how integral he will be this season and say next season to Arsenal Football Club. So that's one to watch. Maitland-Niles is a possibility to leave as well. Historically, Forest had been interested, but not so much now. They've obviously brought in other players and continue to sign for fun, really, especially, as you say, compared to Leicester City. But that is one to take a look at as well. And then Pepe is another one that I think Arsenal fans will be quite interested in to see what happens there. I know that in the last day or so, Pepe himself has seemingly committed his future to Arsenal and wants to fight for his place under Arteta. There is some interest in him, but Arsenal are well aware that they won't even get half, I don't think, the 72 million that they paid for him. And that is a kind of challenge. So many Arsenal fans would like to just cut their losses and offload him. But he is only 27. So that's one to watch during the window. And another thing just to look at with Pepe is the interest of Sevilla. And if they finally get the fee they're looking for Jules Kounde, they will then have some capital to spend. And that's when you might see a little bit more movement, because they're one of the clubs that are definitely tracking Nicola Pepe. So keep an eye out on that. But, you know, we are seeing once again, as players are forced to do interviews, face the media, things from the horse's mouth. And media trained players will always tell you they're staying. They'll always tell you they're committed. So it's to be taken with a pinch of salt. But I think from Edu's perspective, Pepe is a name that Arsenal are prepared to sell for the right price, even though that price will be way, way lower than what they paid.
I totally get that, and yeah, I take most things that people say in press conferences or in interviews. It's beyond, like, I don't even take it at face value. It's like, okay, let's see what really happens. One final question I got for you, based on two rumors we've seen the last day or so. Excuse the way I phrase this: Werner out, Kane in. I mean, Werner could go. I mean, did you see these Harry Kane links to Chelsea yesterday, which bemused me? I like Christian Falk, but I didn't really know where they come from. But Werner out, is that likely to happen? Is that real? Is that real interest from Juve?
Yeah, I mean, Werner has a very friction-based relationship at the moment with Thomas Tuchel, and the complication is going to be around Chelsea finding attackers, because let's not forget Hakim Ziyech is still trying to push for a move to Milan. It's complicated, but that is where he would like to end up. And I think that Werner would be very open to a likely loan deal to Juventus. But Chelsea don't want a scenario where they let one or both those players go and find themselves thin in an attacking sense, which is probably good news, by the way, for Armando Broja, who, as I've said many times, Chelsea were reluctant to sell, and there's been no movement with West Ham's offer. Scamacca's come in. West Ham have never ruled out signing both, but it's highly, highly likely that Broja will stay, or Chelsea will try and persuade him to take a loan deal. The player himself is still looking for clarity as to who Chelsea might bring in and what his role is. And if he doesn't feel he's going to be integral, then he may still push for a permanent move. But the good news for Chelsea is they still have him at the moment as an option. Werner out, though, is looking more and more likely. I know there were links with Newcastle, but I think the player would much prefer Juventus, not just because of the Champions League football, but it's the right fit and style and culture. It's good for him professionally and personally as well. So a loan deal is possible there, but make no mistake, Chelsea don't want to be seen over the coming weeks as just being outgoing FC. They want to be incoming FC, and therefore they will delay key players or positions or cover to make sure that replacements are lined up first. So it is one to watch. The Werner discussions came up a little bit in the delete talks, although it was clear that Juventus, when Chelsea came to the table, did want a straight cash deal. So that's one to watch. There's truth in that. With Harry Kane, I think that it's no secret that he's admired by a number of clubs. And much like when Chelsea wanted Lewandowski, loosely speaking, but it wasn't possible because he was always going to Barcelona, who wouldn't want Harry Kane in their team? But Tottenham are not going to sell Harry Kane this window, full stop. And I think that even if an astronomical 10 times above market value offer was placed from Chelsea or Bayern Munich, it would be very, very difficult for Tottenham to even entertain a discussion, simply because Kane is settled there now. He had a good back end to the season. They've made all the signings that a player like Kane would have liked. They've had a phenomenal window. They're focused on other outgoings now to balance their squad. Levy's invested an extra 100 million on transfers. Conte's been able to stamp his style. They've got Champions League football. What possible reason could Harry Kane have to move to Germany or go to Stamford Bridge when everything at the moment at Tottenham Hotspur Football Club is absolutely perfect and the entire team is built around Harry Kane? So the interest may be genuine. The desire to sign him is there from hundreds of clubs. It always is. And you can say the same for virtually any top footballer from an elite level football club. But can anybody actually strike a deal on Harry Kane in the next 5 weeks with Tottenham Hotspur Football Club and Daniel Levy? And I think the answer to that is a categorical no.
Yeah, I agree. I do think Harry Kane should force his way out. He ain't winning nothing at Tottenham. But there we go. That's just my take. I've got a free Harry Kane campaign going on for 5 years now. I've been begging him to leave and go to a proper club. But no offense, Tottenham fans tuning in. But there we go. What did I miss this here? Someone here. Hi mate, I'm down bad. Can we get Colleen on more often? Get Colleen on more often. When will we see the beautiful Jess? Jess later on this week, and Colleen will be back on Top 6 show tomorrow. He loves those two girls that sit on our panels and host our shows. He loves it. So listen, Ben, I absolutely appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, especially today. I'll let you crack on with what it is you've got to do. And what a game last night, by the way, for the Lionesses. Some of the goals in that match as well were sensational.
Yeah, I mean, it's just brilliant to see the Lionesses succeed. The Russo back heel nutmeg was insane, just pure instinct. Beth Mead has had a phenomenal tournament, scored again. And I covered the opening game of the Euros. I covered the quarterfinal. I'll be at the final as well. And what I would say to anybody that is newer to either the Euros or to WSL, NWSL, is get invested, because 9 times out of 10, particularly with the WSL, it's your team. And 1 or 2, like Lewis FC, don't play under a known brand and are worth exploring too, because they pay their men and women the same. But generally speaking, if you're a Manchester United fan, you've got a man and a women's team. And it's disappointing to see on social media still, when you turn your attention as a reporter to the women's Euros, you get a lot of snidey comments. You get a lot of people suddenly turning around and saying, unfollow, nobody cares. And you go down to Wembley Stadium, either to the fan park, or if you're lucky enough to get a ticket for that final, and you will see how many thousands and thousands and thousands care. And I saw it at Old Trafford for the opening game as well. And it's not about men versus women. It's a different brand. It's a different style. It's more inclusive. It's more technical. It's more competitive in many ways. And we see that increasingly in the WSL, where we're going to get 5-6 horse race potentially for the top few positions. Chelsea are the leaders, Arsenal are there, Man City are there, Tottenham improving, Man United improving. And we're seeing what we saw in the Premier League probably in the late 90s or mid 90s, where a lot of top foreign players are now suddenly wanting to filter across from Europe to be a part of that brand, like Manchester United or Chelsea. The league's improving. So watch it, enjoy it. Don't feel compelled to just compare it to the men's game, and don't be disrespectful or uninformed and just dismiss it without watching it and engaging with it first, because this is an opportunity for England to win a major trophy on home soil for the first time in the men and women's game since 1966. It may not happen again, even though we want to do well in Qatar in the men's game. It may not happen again in any of our lifetimes.
No,
so
exactly.
enjoy it and get behind it.
Absolutely. And I was doing at a point last night where I didn't want to make. I'm not someone that's. I'm not a virtue signaler, but I didn't even want to say well done to England's women. It was just well done England. Like I think that's the whole. I know they call them lionesses, and I get that, but it's almost sort of like they're just England, not women's, not England's ladies, not England's women. Just they're England, and the reason I say that is because in every other sport that I watch, I don't watch. I wouldn't watch Ennis Hill when she was doing the heptathlon, or Denise Lewis, and go, oh, she's a really good female athlete. I just say she's a really good British athlete. Does that make sense? It's almost the language. I'm a big MMA fan, and I grew up in a world where in martial arts, men and women have been equal my entire life. There is no difference when you go to these tournaments. Men are not treated better than the women. And the UFC, for all of the flaws people have in it, the way the women in the UFC are not just supported by the company, but by the fans. Like they sell out the arenas now as a headline acts, and they've done that very organically. And I think that football's on the way to doing that as well. So I agree. I haven't been able to watch all of the tournament with things I had going on, but I've watched, England's games, and I've been watching the quarters and the semis, and it's been really entertaining. And I'd rather take my young children to the women's than the men's, because I can guarantee you on the final there will not be people rioting if we lose. And that's the one thing about the women's, especially family-friendly nature. So get yourself watching it, people. Ben, I absolutely appreciate your time, mate. I really, really do. Viewers, smash the like button before you leave. Back this afternoon for a call-in show for you. So make sure you're here. Take care. Goodbye.